If you want an instrument that sings, play the saxophone. At its best, it's like the human voice, says Stan Getz. A few of you may be interested in playing an instrument, maybe wanting to decide what you want to play, while others of you may be deciding which instrument you want to conquer next. Today I will be informing you about some of the parts of the saxophone, as well as some of the maintenance and the history. For the last 6 years, I have been playing the saxophone in both class and during my leisure time. We're going to start with the parts of the saxophone. And to inform you about those, I'm going to put my saxophone together. I always start with putting my neck strap on. The neck strap is used to help support the weight of the saxophone. Although the alto saxophone is smaller than a couple of the other saxophones, it is still heavier to carry when during marching band or even just sitting down playing in an orchestra. Then I put on the body of my saxophone. In the back, there is a loop where you attach your neck strap. At the very end of the saxophone is the bell. According to Lewis Henley, the bell of the saxophone is like an amplifier. Then along the saxophone are the keys. There are 22 keys on the saxophone, depending on the model and brand, says Lewis Henley. And then there is the screw at the very top for your neck. The neck of the saxophone goes on, and you have the screw to ensure that the neck stays on. There's an octave valve here, and then there's the cork at the very top. The cork is to ensure that your mouthpiece stays on. The mouthpiece goes straight onto the cork, and you can turn it to adjust it to where you can play it. Make sure that's always turned to where you can play correctly. Then there's the ligature. You put the ligature on, and it holds the reed on. Then, although you have most of your saxophone put together, you're missing the essential piece, the reed. In order to make noise, you must have a reed. You put it between the ligature and the mouthpiece and use the screws on the ligature to ensure that it is on safely. You do not screw it on too tight, otherwise it's liable to squeak. Now that I've informed you about some of the parts of the saxophone, we're going to move on to the maintenance. There are multiple things that you can do to maintain your saxophone. One of the main things that you need to maintain is your cork. In order to maintain your cork, you need to use either cork grease or cork oil. I use cork grease that is in an oil form instead of the stick. Your cork is needed in order to make noise out of your saxophone with your mouthpiece. And even when you adjust it and stuff, it is liable to tear. Then there's the pads of your saxophone. In order to maintain the pads of your saxophone, you need to make sure that they are stable and that they aren't coming off. According to Amelia Lyons, author of the article, How to Deal with Leaking Valve Vent Tubes, Replacing a Neck Cork and Fixing Noisy Keys, that is published in the Saxophone Journal, for cleaning pads, get a small bottle of lemon oil or some spray-on type lemon oil furniture polish. Then you also need to maintain the body of your saxophone. Inside of the body of your saxophone can get very dirty with dust and other forms of grime. In order to clean it, you need to have either a cloth or a string swab. The one that I have is actually fairly dirty from the dirt and the grime, which gives you an example of what it can look like if you leave it inside of your saxophone for a very long time. When you clean it, you should just put the swab in and then pull it out and not leave it in for a long amount of time. Otherwise, everything sticks to it and it causes damage inside. Then there's the mouthpiece. In order to clean the mouthpiece, you need a form of spray, or sometimes you can use water, but most of the time there's a spray that you can buy that is better to use rather than just cleaning it with water, because it has like antibacterial things and other forms of germ killing and bacteria killing things. Also, if you have more than one person using a saxophone, it is actually preferred that you have multiple mouthpieces so you don't have to clean it every time that you use it. There's a story that I was told by one of my teachers from previous years, Mrs. Richwine, that she actually got from another person from a college that came to visit, and he was a conductor. And he told her the story that one time he had a student that had left her mouthpiece and all of her saxophone together, and then she would eat and drink before she would play her saxophone, and then all the pieces would get inside of it, and whenever she actually went to play her saxophone at one point, there was bugs and maggots and everything inside of it. So also to maintain your saxophone, you need to tear it apart. like pull it apart and take all the pieces apart and put them back where they need to go inside of your case. Otherwise, it just gets nasty and you may or may not have the bugs like the girl did. Now that I have given you a little bit of maintenance, we'll move on to the history of the saxophone. According to Samuel Adler, the author of The Study of Orchestration, the saxophone was invented by Adolphe Sax in Paris around 1840. According to the history of the saxophone, Sax was born into the industry of inventing the saxophone. Now, Adolphe actually had a little bit of trouble coming along inventing the saxophone. According to Michael Sigel, author of the 2005 book, The Devil's Horn, he remarks that almost immediately his competitors, Adolphe Sax's, now facing substantial losses in revenue, formed a coalition, the Association of United Instrument Makers, replete with president, treasurer, and dues-paying membership to ensure that Sax spent most of his days challenging their specious claims. Although the sax was invented by Adolphe Sax, the ligature was introduced by another person. According to Sigel, Gems invented the ligature, which was ringed with sharp pens. Now that I've given you a little bit of history on the saxophone, today I have informed you about the parts of the saxophone, about the maintenance, and also I have given you some of the history. I hope that next time you go to a place where you see saxophones, you think of all of the things that I have told you about it, and when you're choosing an instrument, you're well informed about the saxophone so that you may or may not pick it also. James Hook, quoted by Sigel in his book, The Devil's Horn, says that a saxophonist is generally a cowboy daredevil type. Are you the type to play the saxophone?